You're listening to the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, where we do fast, fun, free daily deep dives into books of the Bible. And right now, we're going through Esther.
Do they still make the kids read Macbeth in school? It's a Shakespeare play. It's based on some older stories from Scottish lore. I don't think there's a whole lot of truth to it. I don't know. Maybe there is truth to it. It's based on some assassination of an actual king in a succession crisis that maybe happened or maybe didn't happen in Scotland. But in Shakespeare's version, which is written in probably the early 1600s, there are a whole lot of supernatural themes with witches and soothsayers. It kind of has some of the same feel as Julius Caesar in that regard. But in that play, there's, of course, the character. I mean, it's the character from the title. It's Macbeth. Everybody knows that guy. But the other character that everybody remembers from Macbeth is, of course, Lady Macbeth, right? She's the definition, the literary epitome of a sneaky, beautiful female monster lurking in the shadows behind her husband, and behind that smile is something more than devious, something evil and bloodthirsty and corrupting. Instead of being the woman who props up her man and gets the best stuff out of him, she's the woman who drags him down into the pit and uses him and manipulates him to satisfy her ambitions vicariously, not even vicariously, because she gets the benefit, I guess, through him. You don't want to be a Lady Macbeth. So it's not something that you aspire to. You don't run into a lot of little girls named Macbeth because I think most people know better. Don't get me wrong, now Beth is great. I'm not, if that's your name, I think that's a great name. I know a lot of great Beths and Elizabeths and Betsy's. I think that's a great one. But Macbeth, you don't get that name very often for women. And if you do, that makes about as much sense as naming your kid Jezebel. You don't want to name your kid Jezebel because if there's anybody in the Bible who is a Lady Macbeth kind of character, the first one who comes to mind is Jezebel, right? She is the lady in 1 Kings 21. Not get me wrong. I know we were talking about Esther. We're going to get back to Esther in just a minute. It's all going to make sense. But in 1 Kings 21, there's this legendary enemy of the good guys of the Bible in the Age of the Kings. This is back in the age of the divided kingdoms. You got the kingdom of Israel up north, and then you got the kingdom of Judah down south, and up north you got this horrible king named Ahab, who's a lot like Xerxes. He's bloodthirsty sometimes, but also weak and manipulatable. He is definitely one of the kings in the Bible who is a part of the through line motif of the entire Bible, that is the clown king motif, the king who imagines that they are very important and very powerful, and you will kneel before me, and I will have my way, and I will have the things my heart desires. I am in control of stuff behind the scenes. God, who doesn't get mentioned at all or barely gets mentioned, is actually in charge and is just completely secure and comfortable in his own skin, while these clown kings just rage and shout and bluster, but there's really nothing to them, and they all end up eventually being made a fool of. Well, Ahab is no different. He and his wife come to a very ugly prophesied end. But one of Ahab's big crimes in his reign as king up there in the northern kingdom of Israel is that he sees this guy's vineyard. The dude's name is Naboth, and apparently it is a super nice vineyard. And he tries to eminent domain it, sort of. He goes to Naboth and he's like, I am the king and I like your vineyard and I would like to buy it. And Naboth is like, but I mean, it's the ancient world. It's the Bronze Age and stuff, you know. You seem like a great king and everything. There's a little bit of paraphrasing here, but he more or less says, there would be a sin against my ancestors. I mean, this is our familial inheritance. This is our whole fortune, our whole future is wrapped up in this. I can't do it. I mean, he literally says, the Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers. And so then the next thing that happens in 1 Kings 21 is Ahab goes home and he's sullen and angry because Naboth the Jezreelite had said, I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers. So Ahab laid on his bed sulking and he refused to eat. But then his wife Jezebel, basically Lady Macbeth before it was cool, came in and asked him, why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat? And he answered it, because I said to Naboth the Jezreelite, sell me your vineyard, or if you prefer, I'll give you another vineyard in his place. But he said, I won't give you my vineyard. Jezebel, his wife, said, is this how you act as king over Israel? Get up and eat. Cheer up. I'll get you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name. So she's using somebody else's signet ring. Remember, we're talking about Esther. I mean, this is all of this stuff echoes over there in Esther. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, placed his seal on them, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city with him. In those letters, she wrote, blah, 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 basically kill him and we're going to take the thing. And that's what she does. And she effectively helps her husband to off this guy so that he can get some vineyard that he really, really wanted. It's been like 4 minutes ago, so I don't totally remember how much we talked about Lady Macbeth at the beginning of this, but in the play, Macbeth, the dude, he's a nobleman in Scotland, and there are 3 witches that come to him, and they have a bunch of rhymes about toil and trouble and bubbles and cauldrons and things like that, and they tell him that these crazy things are going to happen and you're going to become king. Well, the current king is a guy named Duncan, and Lady Macbeth gets a letter that she wasn't supposed to read that says that this prophecy had occurred, and she's like, well, then we got to kill Duncan. And she turns Macbeth, who seems like an okay guy, but weak, gullible, manipulatable, again, much like King Ahab, much like King Xerxes. And she's like, well, yeah, we got to kill him. And so she talks him into doing it, and she creates this elaborate plan. And dude Macbeth goes and does it, but he's not very good at it. And so she has to go and clean up his mess and frame the guards for the whole thing. And eventually, it's kind of a telltale heart situation with her. She sort of loses her mind as the play goes along. And, this is where you get the line, out, damned spot out, as she can't get the imaginary blood off of her hands because the whole thing messes her up. So let me just say this. If this is your first time ever being here and listening to this podcast, this is probably a bit disorienting. I think usually I do a better job of bringing people up to speed. Hi, by the way, if this is your first time, I'm super glad that you're checking this out. We're working on the book of Esther. And in the book of Esther, there's a guy named Haman who wants to kill all of the Jews. And Esther is a secret Jew who became queen. She's married to King Xerxes. And this bad guy who wants to kill all the Jews, Haman, he just got invited to a banquet with Queen Esther. And he doesn't know what it's all about. He assumes that she just wants to heap honors on him. He's a really insecure dude. But on his way out of the banquet, he runs into this Jewish guy, Mordecai, who won't bow to him. And it just makes him crazy, filled with rage and anger and impotent punch at the wind kind of stuff. And so he goes home in Esther chapter 5, and he complains to his wife, and he gets all his friends together to tell him how awesome he is. And his wife, Zeresh, who we haven't met up until this point in the book of Esther, Esther chapter 5, she turns out to be pretty Lady Macbethy along with his friends. So this is what we get. Haman went out of the banquet with Esther and King Xerxes in Esther chapter 5, and he was in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth and his many sons and all the ways the king had honored him and how he'd elevated him above all the other nobles and officials. And at this point, you're like, well, then why are you upset, dude? Like you have everything anybody could ever ask for. And the only other thing you could possibly get at this point in the world, there's only one rung above you, and it's literally the King of Kings, and somebody occupies that role right now, but still he's finding a reason to complain. And then he goes on to brag even more. And that's not all. Haman added, I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she's invited me along with the king tomorrow. But then he goes on, he says, but all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew, Mordecai, sitting at the king's gate. Okay, this right now is the moment. This is why I talked about Lady Macbeth. This is why I talked about Jezebel. Both of those two ladies had a fork in the road moment where they could have been like, man, who wouldn't love more power? Am I right? Who wouldn't love more gold, more manservants, pool boys? That would be fantastic. But we can't just go around murdering people. And my husband's getting worked up and a little bit silly. I'm going to talk him down. Hey, honey, come on. We have so much. We're so blessed. We can't get all worked up over something like that. We'll get a different vineyard. Hey, honey, come on. It's one guy. People say stuff. Not everybody's going to like you. You can't make everybody like you. It's all right. I like you. I see you for who you are. Just let that poor, sad little man sit at the gate and let him not stand up. He's the one who's missing out. He's missing out on being friends with and appreciating somebody like you. Come on. Let's just have a nice party. Your friends are here, right? But she doesn't do that. And Lady Macbeth didn't do that. And Jezebel didn't do that. They all chose to amp up the situation and take it to the next level. Verse 14, his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, well, have a gallows built 75 feet high and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the dinner and be happy. The suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the gallows built. That is insane that rather than considering any sort of off-ramp or like, well, I don't know, once you start hanging people on gallows and stuff, that's the kind of thing that can sort of boomerang. I mean, once you start down that road, people can get real defensive. They can fire back at you. That's a pretty nuclear option. I'm not sure, even if we don't have any character, that's the most shrewd thing to do. But instead, they hear his one little speech. I mean, it's just one paragraph. I got all this great stuff, but it makes me mad. This guy won't rise. Oh, gosh, okay. Well, let's just build a gigantic 75-foot high gallows, and we'll just hang him up there for everybody to see. Obviously. Can we get back to the party, please? It's insane how quick on the trigger his wife and his friends are to go right to this just unthinkable nuclear option. Have you ever had a party where you invite some friends over, or even just a private, intimate drink with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your wife, your husband, whomever, and you just throw out some stuff that isn't going well at work? Maybe you complain about your boss or your manager a little bit, or some rude customer. Have you ever been at a party where they're just like, you should kill him? And you should do it super publicly, and something that's like as tall as a base path in baseball, like super, super tall, so everybody sees that you killed him. Because I've never had that happen at a party ever. Camilla, never. She's never even been like, you should punch him. Not even punching. She's never even been like, you should find some sneaky way to undermine them. She's always like, you should be nice to them because that's how Jesus is. It's what he would want you to do. You should be nice to those people and see if you can win them over. You should forgive them, or maybe you should look at your own problems. That's the kind of stuff she always says. Never, ever, ever, not even once, not even that one time she drank a third of a Mike's Hard Lemonade, was she like, you should kill them because they slighted you. I think this is a really odd way for a wife to behave and super disappointing. And that is why I think you don't hear Zeresh as a little girl name that's very common anymore, because it's a lot like Lady Macbeth and Jezebel, and you just don't really want to be married to that. Okay, I think that's plenty. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.